The second rebellion in Albion would be underway, as Prince Wales had regained his kingdom, but now they had to be prepared for the assault from wards, as the army of 70,000 had been split, with 25,000 led by wards, now dubbing himself the Deathstroke, was planning to return to Albion to crush the rebellion and end the civil war of the kingdom once and for all, while the remaining fighting forces stood in the territory of Gothia to stand against the united front of the kingdoms of Tristian and Germania, led by Queen Henrietta, along with her fighting forces, her familiar Saito Higara, the Blue Beetle, and Typhon, the Green Lantern. Ward's army would arrive in just 3 days' time, and as they hit out, Damien and Louise would receive their final transmission. Via a magical mirror, Henrietta's assistant and her confidant in arms would give them their final instructions. Alerting the two that Wards would be on his way, he instructed for both Damien and Louise to assist Prince Wales in the defeat of the split forces of Albion. Once the army was defeated, Prince Wales could reassume control of the throne, and this war could be brought to an end. Louise would eagerly accept the responsibility, and Damien, knowing that he would fight next to her, would accept the responsibility of the mission as well. This still left them just a short time before the battle would begin. Safe to say that the nerves for the both of them were at an all-time high. Even while Wales had temporarily regained control of his kingdom, it was only temporary, as the members of the Rebel Alliance would have to face off against the invading forces of Wards, who now had the army of Albion under his control. As they waited, Julio would give both Damien and Louise privacy. Damien would take time to comfort Louise, as he could see that she still had a lot of troubling thoughts, primarily because she hadn't mastered her ability of using void magic. Powerful but dangerous, not only to her enemies but also to herself. For now, Damien tried to be as encouraging as he could, but there was something else that was bothering Louise. Even in the best case scenario, even if they were to win, the casualties were going to be high. Even if we are able to do this, Louise would say, there's a chance that we could die, isn't it? I've thought about every possibility, Damien would say. And yes, there's a possibility that we might not come back from this. I figured, who would have thought that I would die in service to my country? Not me. Didn't think that I'd end up dying in a place like this. Really? So you pictured how you were going to die? Well, there were always some distinct possibilities. There was always the chance that the city could get frozen, or the Penguin could have started a gang war. There was always the chance of dying via crowbar. I mean, the chances are low, but it's never zero, especially with the clown. There was always Bane potentially snapping my back. Being taken over by Poison Ivy's plants, also a possibility. Or, yeah, it's probably messed up that I actually think about many ways that I could die. And yet you still go out. You're still a protector of your world. Superhero is what you call it? Yeah, something like that. Although honestly, I'm nothing more but a vigilante with anger issues. Lots of anger issues. You're not that bad, Louise would say. At least no better than me. You actually have the skills to do something with your life, and you have the resolve to see it through. I never had anything like that. I've always been a failure to my family, to my friends, everyone who's ever needed to depend on me, and yet I'm always the one that has to be saved. Even now, the Queen is requesting the use of my power to aid her in this war, and I'm not even confident enough that I can pull it off. I talk a big game, and yet I'm always second-guessing myself. I'm always nervous. I never know how things are going to turn out for me. I always think that if I yell it, if I wish it, if I dream of it enough, that things will happen. But dreams like that never come true. I always thought that because I was an aristocrat, I was better than everyone else. I always thought that my family name was something to live up to, that it would give me a great honor. And yet now, my family name means nothing. My family wealth means nothing. I'm staring death right in the face, and all the things that mattered to me mean absolutely nothing at all. Because in the end, I'll most likely just become another name on a gravestone. And just a gravestone, since there might not even be a body to... Damien would hold on to Louise as he felt her shaking in that moment. Holding on to her and trying to provide her the comfort that she needed. You're a lot more than you think. Yeah. And yet why do I feel like I'm falling apart? It's okay. I'm your familiar after all. I'm supposed to hold you together. That's my duty. There is one thing that I want. And what's that? If I am going to die, then at the very least, I would like to die married. What? You wanna... Come on. It's not like there's anyone else here. I mean, I'm not sure now is the time to. There is no time. There's no better time. There might not even be a tomorrow for us. So at the very least, will you please give me that? I'd like to have the dignity of at least choosing how I go out. And I don't want to die a widow or die single. If we both die, then neither of us will be a widow. At least I'll have someone to keep me company in the afterlife now, won't I? That's what you think. Oh, please, you're my familiar, in this life and the next. It doesn't matter where we go. Louise would hold up her hand and point at Damien's that had the ruined mark of Gandalf. You and I are bound together by the power of the universe, something stronger than any fate or destiny. The moment I brought you into this world, you and I became one. I simply wish to make it legal, that's all. Your loyalty to me will not just be in this life, but it will also be in the next. You're that confident? Damien would say. It's the one thing I'm confident about. So please, let me have it. Julio overheard their conversation and decided to make himself known. He was ordained to actually commence a wedding ceremony, even if it was a small one. And they had just enough supplies to get it done. Later on that evening, Julio would call them both into the barn, where they had been hiding out, on the outskirts of Albion. There, a small ceremony would be held, as both Damien and Louise would be given a special flower placed in a glass bottle. The flower would illuminate, as a tiny portion of their life essence were placed into the flowers respectively. Damien would exchange his with Louise. As long as the flower was lit, it showed that the other one was alive, no matter how far apart they were. The light of the flower would give credence to their existence. As they exchanged their flowers, they had 2 makeshift bands put into place. They were just silver rings, nothing entirely special or fancy, although Damien did take the time to carve their names and initials into them, slipping them onto each other's fingers. As Damien would remove his mask, he looked into the sapphire eyes of Louise as it basked in the torches that illuminated the barn under the cover of night. He saw that in that moment Louise was allowing herself to be vulnerable, allowing herself to feel the most at peace she had ever been. And for Louise, she had never been confident of much, if of anything at all. But in this moment, there was only one thing that she truly knew within the depths of her heart, that she knew more than anything that at this moment, the only place that she wanted to be, the only place she needed to be was here. There was no telling what the battle was going to unfold, but she knew that whatever it took, as long as they were together, there was nothing that they couldn't accomplish. They celebrated their union with a kiss and bottle of wine as their glasses were filled. Both Louise and Damien would exchange cups, the two of them toasting to one another. As they drank their fill, Damien would hold on to Louise as she slowly drifted into a sleep, a deep slumber that she couldn't awaken from. In her final moments of consciousness, Damien would bestow upon her a final kiss, allowing for her to fall into a blissful sleep in his arms, as Julio waited with his carrier dragon already ready to go. He knew what Damien was planning, and he knew there was no point in stopping him. But he knew that the best thing that he could do was provide help for his friend in a time of need. As Damien would allow for Louise to rest, he took time to enjoy the moment between the two of them before carrying his newly made bride into his arms and handing her off to Julio. I figured you'd pull something like this. At least one of you would. So what were you going to do if she had gotten to me first? Well, I would have carried you away, of course, and along with her. I know that you'd never forgive me if I allowed her to die in a place like this. You know me all too well, Julio. But still, do you think that this is a cruel fate? I mean, even if the army is divided, there's no guarantee that this will be a victory for you or Wales. And if it's not, it's going to end very badly. Could you really put her through such a fate? If I allowed her to die, then I wouldn't live up to my duties, now would I? Louise is a kind soul. She doesn't have the heart for war or for violence. And I won't allow her to be subjugated to that. I won't allow her to see it or allow any harm to befall her. If I don't make it out of this alive, then I know she'll hate me. She'll hate me more than she's hated anyone. She'll hate me for how I've left her, for the state that I've left her in. And sadly enough, there's no way I can change that. But if I have to incur her wrath for the next 100 years, then even that would be a small price to pay. I can only hope that when it's all said and done, I'm worthy enough to go to a place better than this when I die. And who knows, maybe when it's all said and done, we will meet again. You're far too harsh on yourself, Damien. You are a kind soul. I have no doubt that even if you are to fall in battle, there is a place waiting for a man as honorable as you. Yeah, just take her and get out of here. Understood? Julio would take hold of a sleeping Louise as they would fly off into the night, as Damien would grab hold of his sword, Durflinger. So, a splitting of true love, the sword would say. A young man fighting for everything that matters to him. There's only one thing that matters to me right now, and she just flew off. The only thing I can do is make sure that there's a world for her to live in. A world without war. I can feel your fighting spirit. The power of Gandalf flows through you, Damian Wayne. So, what's next, partner? It's simple. We're going to win, no matter what it takes. Damian would soon join with Prince Wales, as the members of his loyalist rebellion would stand at the walls, waiting as the treacherous army of Albion, now under the command of wards 25,000 strong, would make their way as the dawning sun began to rise. A man clad in orange and blue, with a mask half orange and half black, as he ascended upon the rolling hills of the floating continent, as the army had now respawned back into its homeland. Prince Wales, now standing before his army, would stand in the front line as he awaited for wards who called out to him. So, the treacherous Prince Wales of Albion still breathes. That's right, wards, and this is your last warning, along with the soldiers that follow you. Turn back from what you have done and leave my country. I cannot do that. This is no longer your country. You betrayed it. No, I'm saving it. You men starved for war and for battle, never minding the toll that takes upon it. The toll is a small price to pay for freedom. There is no freedom with you wards. You are nothing more but a man that deals in treachery and scum. You know not a thing about honor. You have besmirched the family legacy that you came from. You are nothing more but a common criminal, lowliest of the low. And you will not die a quaint death, or one with honor. The only dignity that you have is to spare your men and to leave now. Otherwise, all of their blood will be upon your head, and there will be no escape for you. I have no reason to escape, Your Highness. You are the one who does not realize that you are outmatched. You had one chance to do the right thing, and even now I will grant you clemency a final time. Allow yourself to be executed and to fall at my blade, and I will spare your rebels. Your country will remain intact, and I will even pull away my forces from Tristane. Even now, there is still a great portion of the Albion army still waiting in the province of Gothia. Your precious queen will not be victorious. And I know you better than anyone. You do not want her death to be on your head. Now how long will you continue to be selfish, Your Highness? Before he even had a chance to respond, the Nightwing, flying in the sky, piloted by Damian, would descend upon the Albion forces, firing his entire payload at the army. Every missile, every bullet, everything that he had to offer. He fired with precision and accuracy, as now the flying dragon riders of the Albion army would engage in the sky. The diversion and the surprise attack would give Wales the advantage he needed, as his army would engage with the treacherous army of Albion, and the great battle would now begin. In the meantime, in the province of Gothia, Henrietta had now been given the signal. She would charge into battle along with her armed forces as they fought against the remaining strength of Albion. Sheffield would attempt to provide assistance. Using her power of conjuring magical artifacts, she would create an army of cinderblock golem soldiers. Both Saito and Typhon would engage with the massive rock-like army, as Typhon, using the power of the Green Lantern, would create shielding barriers to block from the raining arrows in streaks of flames, flying on high and leading an air raid assault, while Saito, with the powers of the Blue Beetle, would soar into the sky. With the Scarab at his disposal, he would unleash the full fury of his strength against the forces of Albion. Both Typhon and Saito proving to be the difference makers in the battle, allowing for Henrietta and her forces to stand firm as they held off against the massive army. For Damien, he fired everything he had until the ship was practically useless. Once that was done, the only thing he could do now was take out what remained in a big kamikaze attack. Using the ejection chute at the last moment, Damien would fly from out of the jet as it crashed into a portion of the army, destroying it in its wake and damaging its forces in number. With the army now being reduced, it became more of an even fight, as now on the outskirts of the country of Albion, a full-scale war had now begun. Damien would fight as he slashed his way through Albion's soldiers. His years of training under his grandfather Ra's al Ghul, all of it was coming back to him. The heart of a warrior, the bloodlust of the Al Ghul, the grandson of the head of the League of Assassins. That blood that coursed through his veins allowed him to strike his enemies down with every fervor of his being. Even for Derflinger, he had never been wielded by someone with such force and ferocity. He could feel that even now Damien had a conflict of heart, and he did. It had been the first time in a long time that he had taken life on such a massive scale. He knew that there was a chance, no, a certainty, that his father would never approve of these actions. But Damien had to come to his own realization. The life that his father lived and the life that he lived were two totally different lives. He loved and respected his father, Bruce Wayne, the Batman, the man that taught him to choose justice over vengeance, who taught him the code of a hero. Except in this moment, Damien was not a hero. He was a soldier. But not a soldier of Tristane, not a soldier of the Queen. He was a soldier unto himself, a soldier for Louise del Valladare, and he fought on her behalf. Prince Wales would be fighting beside him, as the two would eventually make their way to the center of the Grand Army's battles, where the masked man known as Wards the Deathstroke struck down another set of the rebels as he turned to face the two ires of his force of anger. "It's time we end this, Wards," Wales would say as he readied himself with his sword, and Damien standing beside him. "This is all I've dreamed about. I'm going to finish what I started with you, Your Highness. And as for you, the Robin, an eye for an eye. If you're so eager to be a blind man, then be my guest." Both Damien and Wales would charge at Wards at the same time. Wards now wielding two swords, one in each hand, he would engage with both of the boys. He had definitely learned from the last time they fought. Damien had a hard time getting through his defenses. For Wales, he was able to hold his own, but Ward's years of experience, his larger body and frame, It was proving to be greater than even the young prince was expecting. Their fight in the middle of the battlefield was the stuff of legends. For Damien, as he engaged with wards, there was something rather unsettling about him. His fighting style had drastically changed since the last time they faced. Sure, he had always been good, but there was something eerily familiar about the way he was fighting. The way he fought, it was as if he was initiated. But it had to be a coincidence. Perhaps he had been studying from when he fought against Damien. That had to be the only answer. Because the only other answers that could be were unsettling ones. As they continued on in their fight, Wards could feel himself starting to be overwhelmed. Even for all of his skill and his older age, it had seemed that it was catching up with him. Though still he would view himself as a man in his prime, the boys were something ferocious. For every stab and slash he had managed to land on them, they were able to dish it out just as viciously. As they would continue on in their fight against one another, he still held the advantage, even in a 2-on-1. Wales would attempt to go for a sneak attack, only for him to be stabbed in the left shoulder blade, rendering his left arm completely useless as he was backhanded with the hilt of Ward's swords. Damien would try to go in for an attack as well, only to have himself be stabbed in the leg, but Damien responded by knocking one of the blades out of his hand, and he would use the butt of Durflinger, the hilt of his blade, smashing it into the right wrist of Ward's, shattering it. Though the man, he was able to fight through the pain as he kicked back at Damien. Now, with everyone having a handicap, it seemed like it was anyone's fight. However, a figure dressed in black would dash through the battlefield, cutting and hacking away at every enemy he came across. He had seemed to be moving at blinding speeds that were hardly perceptible by anyone. As he arrived at the last moment, he was just in time to watch the grand finale, as Wards was now surrounded on his left and on his right. He was faint and out of breath, and even after all of the damage he had incurred and what he had dished out, the boys were still able to stand. Wales holding his sword in one arm, and for Damien, still standing strong despite the critical blow to his leg. "The war is just about even now, partner," Durflinger would say. "Your enemy is on his last legs. You must strike true and bring him down." "Yeah, I've got that. It's not going to make it easy. And knowing his type, he's not someone who can take a loss graciously. This isn't over. I've come too far to stop now. It's all pointless," Damien would say. "Everyone and everything. All this death. What do you have to prove?" "I have to prove to my master that I am more than just a mere pawn in his games." "Your master? Who's your master?" "Like I would ever tell you. I would just as soon bite my own tongue and die before I ever betray him. He has shown me the truths of this world, things greater than you could ever experience. All I have to do is get back to the Lazarus." The moment he mentioned that word, a sword would protrude from his back and out of his chest, as the figure cloaked in black stood behind him. "I never liked you, Wards. You always had a way of running your mouth. Even now, you've said far too much." "But how did I know about your treachery? I've always kept my eyes on you. The Master has never trusted you, just as I have never trusted you. And now, his suspicions have been proven correct. This has been a failure. Even now, the battle at Gothia, it goes in favor of Tristane. All of the Master's resources wasted by you, and all because you refused to give him an answer. You have acted of your own accord for the last time, and I am afraid that the price for your insolence is death. I don't have to take this from the likes of you. The figure in black pulled out his sword from the back of Ward's. In a single swinging motion, he lopped off his head, causing it to roll at the feet of Damien, and the body to fall lifelessly to the ground. And now there's the likes of you two to deal with. Personally, I find all of this to be rather pointless, although I am curious to know what you're capable of. Perhaps if you were to experience the gift of the Master, perhaps you could still be of some use. Maybe as my subordinate, the figure in black would say. You talk a big game, you know? It's easy to strike a man from behind when he doesn't see it coming. The rules of war is to win by any means necessary. You of all people should know that. These were the principles that you were instructed in, and yet you've betrayed them. Everything. Everything? You talk as if you know me, Damien would say. In the midst of their conversation, Wales would attempt to strike at the figure in black. Damien would yell for him not to. And unfortunately for Prince Wales, the cost for his insolence would be his life, as immediately the sword would be plunged into his chest, stabbing right through the heart. All of this fuss, and yet you die just the same. It seemed even in this reality your fate was always written in the stars. Wales! Damien rushed over to him and caught him as he fell to the ground. Wales, it'll be all right. We'll get you to a... There's no point in trying to save him. His life is already forfeit. Now that simply leaves you, Damien Wayne. In that moment, a shiver fell down Damien's spine. Because how did the man in black know who he was? How did he know any of this? Damien would have tried to strike him down, but he was easily disarmed, kicked in his bad leg, and forced to fall, as the figure in black looked down upon him. Damien could only see his eyes, but perhaps that was all he needed to see, because as he stared into them, what he saw were the eyes that were all too familiar. Even for his stature, even if his body did not match the proper measurements, he could never forget those eyes. The eyes that were always hidden behind the mask. The eyes that stared into the abyss. The eyes of the man who lost his world in an alleyway and never recovered. But why were those the eyes looking back upon him? Why were they here? Before Damien could even have his question answered, the man in black disappeared once again, leaving him there as the final remnants of the war came to a close. Saito and Typhon would arrive shortly after, as the war had come to an end. They were victorious, but it was still at a great cost. Prince Wales was rushed into emergency surgery, as the healers and the other members of the medical corps would attempt to save his life, Henrietta staying by his side the whole time. It felt like days had passed, but even though he had gone into a stable condition, he was still critical and currently in a coma-like state. Thankfully enough, Albion had been spared any further bloodshed, and for now, Henrietta would act as the advisor, helping to get the country back to its feet. But still, even in their victory, there was still a bitterness. By the time Louise had awoken, she was extremely furious with Damien. So much so that she was not even speaking to him at the moment after the stunt he pulled. And Damien honestly couldn't blame her. They had won, but at what cost? Now Louise was not looking his way. She didn't even bother to call upon him. Damien knew that staying back with her at the academy wasn't a good idea, so for now he spent his time in the aforementioned barn of justice, continuing to work on the remnants of his now broken fighter jet, the Nightwing. Tai Fom and Saito would assist whenever they could visit, but even now there was a lot more in terms of recovery for the people and for everyone involved in the conflict. And for Damien, it left him time to stew in his own thoughts. The mention of the Lazarus in those eyes. But could it possibly be true? Derflinger would take a moment to speak with Damien, as he could sense the conflict in his swordsman. What seems to be troubling you, boss? It's everything. What is this world, Derf? Damien would ask. What exactly are you getting at? You know what I mean. What's this talk of the Lazarus? How does this world know about it? Everything. None of it makes sense. From the day of the familiar exams, how I even got here, how this world is connected to other worlds similar to mine. This world is the nexus point, but it's not just that. There's more to it, isn't it? There's more than what you're telling me. This is gonna be troublesome, Derf would say. I could tell from the moment that you picked me up. There was more to you than what met the eye. Although, I didn't want to believe that it was even possible. What? What exactly are you getting at, Derf? This world has a lot of history. Much of it has been lost due simply to the sands of time. You could say that I'm nothing more but an old relic, a part of that ancient history. You aren't the first person to bear the mark of Gandalf. I knew the original Gandalf. Okay, and what else? It's a long story, kid. I've got nothing but time nowadays. I'm not really welcomed back on campus, especially with Louise. Saito's busy assisting the Queen, especially with Wales in his condition. And Tai, well, he's been busy acting as the defensive protector of Tristane. I'm all on my own here. If you know something that you need to tell me, what is it? All right. If you want the truth, then I'll give it to you. It started a little over 700 years ago, if I presume. Gandalf at that time was a great and powerful warrior, a protector of many kingdoms. In his time, he fought against many powerful warriors, many enemies of the land. But there was one that he could never beat. No matter how many times he killed him, he kept coming back over and over again. until finally Gandalf lost. I was there when it happened. I was there when the man that killed my partner in combat. Who was this man? Why ask me a question you already know the answer to? You can feel it, can't you? His presence in this world? He is the one of whom is your ancestor. The man you call grandfather. No, it can't be. Are you saying... That's right. The man that killed Gandalf was your grandfather, Ra's al Ghul. This concludes The Familiar of Zero, Tales of the Robin. What if Robin was Louise's familiar? Season 2, Part 6, the Season 2 finale. First and foremost, I want to thank everyone for their support with this series. When I initially came up with Season 1, I had a lot of good feedback, and I was definitely looking forward to doing Season 2, although, when it comes to a lot of Season 2s, you never really know how it's going to go. But I'd like to say that Season 2 overall has been received pretty positively for the most part. I would like to say that in this season, I didn't really do as much in terms of the other side characters like Saito and Tai Fam. I really wanted to make Season 2 more of a story-driven arc for Damien, especially for his character in terms of what's going forward, and trying to blend elements of the original series of Familiar of Zero along with more Damian Wayne-centric stories. Is definitely proven to be a positive, and after the conclusion of this video, I think you guys should have a pretty good idea of what storyline is going to be adapted for this series. So with that, I do hope you guys will look forward to Season 3. Season 3 is definitely going to be more of a team-centric, action-packed kind of story with a lot of new characters that are going to be introduced in Season 3, and with a lot of plot points in Season 3 that's really going to take this story to the next level as we continue into the journey into the Infinite Earths. But all in all, I think that Season 2 was definitely a success, and I am thankful to all of you for your support. Like I always say, can't do it without you. You make the channel grow. You make the core grow. And stay tuned for tomorrow as we continue our next story in the world of anime and DC Comics. But anyway, this concludes The Familiar of Zero, Tales of the Robin. What if Robin was Louise's familiar? Season 2, Part 6, the Season 2 finale. As always, I'm Javon Harrington with Power Core Productions and Podcastings, signing off, and I'll see you next time.